Hello and good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone, and welcome to the APIMatic webinar on improving your low API adoption. I'm Keith Casey. I'm going to be your moderator and MC today. I've been in and around the API space for 15 years, including at Twilio when there were just 20 of us, at Okta where I launched API access management, and most recently at Ingrok, right now where I am now, working to help people launch secure software faster. Throughout all of these, our APIs played a key role in making everything work. We need people to find our API, to test it, to integrate it, and to roll into production as quickly as possible. I've seen it done exceptionally well, and I've seen it done poorly. If you're like most of us, you've spent huge amounts of time and energy making sure your API is right, that it's designed well, that it works flawlessly, in fact. And you probably put some time into your docs, but you may have forgotten one piece: the API portal itself. In this presentation, APImatic's Chief Product Architect, Mehdi Raza, is going to address some good and bad patterns of API portals that they've discovered and addressed at APImatic. I'm looking forward to this because great API design should also have a great portal. Now, before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. We want your questions, so please ask. Just drop them down into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll dive into them at the end. And now I'll hand it off to Mehdi. Please take it away.
Hey, my name is Mehdi Raza. I'm the Chief Product Architect at APIMatic. I've been working here a little over 6 years, helping API providers set up their go-to-market strategy for their API. Often this involves launching API portals for them, and then of course setting up SDKs to go along with that. During this time, we have learned a lot about what can go wrong when you're working on your go-to-market strategy for your API. And when people see low API adoption, they often are a bit lost about what went wrong with their strategy. And I'm going to talk about how you should be looking more closely at your API portal, because I think that is where most people fumble along in their API program. So I'm going to take you along on this journey where we are going to see what an API launch looks like, and then what the API consumer's journey looks like when they're using your API. So something like this happens when a new API is being launched. You have a product that is gaining traction very fast, and you want to keep the ball rolling. So what do? You work on adding new channels to your product, and this involves adding programmatic access to your product, for which APIs is the best way to go forward, right? So for that, you prepare your API for public release, which involves talking to the product team, talking to the engineering team, talking to the marketing folks, and talking to the business folks to get the story right. And this also involves writing documentation for your API, preparing API specification as well as part of this process. And you of course want to set up an API gateway because you want to keep your API only accessible to people. Sometimes you have a public API that does not need API authentication, but mostly they do. And then, of course, time of the launch, you email all your customers about your API, hoping for the big day to bring in a lot of people who will use your API in their application. So it seems like all your ducks are in a row. So what can go wrong? So it turns out that API launch is a bust, even though you prepared so well. You know that your API launch did not go well because from your analytics and the metrics that you're collecting, you can see that barely anyone uses your API. This is bad. And then you see that people are not building applications using your API, because this is what the real goal was, to build an ecosystem around your API. But it seems like that people are not building the great apps using your API that you expected. And then to kind of make it worse, you see that there's another red flag that people are bouncing off your API portal within seconds. So it seems like you had an API that is clearly useful, and yet people are not using it. What is going wrong? In this case, usually I recommend that you look more closely at your API portal. Because that is the thing that when you launch the API consumers, the product managers, this is what they're using to evaluate your API for use in their application. So if you have a really nice API portal, it will do the API conversion, API user conversion for you. But if you don't have a API portal, as we'll see along, there are quite a few mistakes that people make. People will bounce off your API portal, and you're going to have a tough time having your API adopted in the community. To understand what can go wrong and how we can optimize your API portal to improve API adoption, we have to first understand the journey that an API consumer goes through before they start using your API in their application. I like to break down the journey in three big phases. The first phase is the discover phase, where an API consumer who is not a consumer, you're just a prospect, they learn about what your API. So this is when they might have learned about your API from a newsletter, or maybe they heard about it from word of mouth, or maybe they saw it on Hacker News. So they just learn about your API and they click through the link and they have just landed on your API portal. So this is the phase where you tell them what your API is about. And this in this part, you tell them what value your API can bring for the user. And here you only have only a few seconds, because that's how the internet works. When people are clicking through unknown links, they only have a short attention span. So you want to capture the user at this point, because the next step is quite important, and that is when the user will start exploring your API in detail. They would want to learn what your API can do for them, because at this point they're trying to figure out whether there is a use case inside their business where they can use this API. They're not yet sure, but they want to explore all the options in your API, and they're going to do a match with some of the use case they have in the back of their head. You have the user engage only for a few minutes, maybe 1 minute at tops, because they just learn about your product. So here, keeping them engaged is the biggest goal that you will have. And to do that, I will show that you will need to show value proposition, and this means showing actually in action. You have to demonstrate your value proposition. And once you have the user engage all the way to phase 3, the phase 3 would be for the user to integrate your API in their application, because this is where they achieve value proposition. They're going to use your API and achieve an actual business goal for their company. So, but this time you have a bit few more minutes, but even with a 10 minutes, you're going to see that this is not going to be enough, and you will have to work really, really hard for this to go smoothly. So when I put these three phases of API consumption journey, I always try to give a real world example of how someone would sell shoes in a mall. So this is how the story goes like. So when someone is discovering about your shoe shop, they're usually going to go to a mall, right? So this is the entry point for your shoe shop. And once they're through the mall, they will reach your shop where they will see all these options that you have, all these products, and you're going to play around with all the items that you have on display. Maybe they're going to touch it, play around with it, check whether it's their size. And once they have explored all these options, maybe they have one option that they like a lot. They're going to try it on, and this is kind of the integrate phase for us, right? So this discover, explore, integrate phase is kind of like buying shoes in a shopping mall. So again, if we uh, bring it into the API world, what's really happening is, I'll take the example of a payment solution. The discover phase is going to be like someone learning about your payment solution. They're just getting to know about it for the first time. And then the next phase is where you show them what all the options are in your payment solution, what all the use case and scenarios are, and maybe you will show that using examples. You're just not going to mention them. You're going to link to your example. We'll drill down into this in detail in a bit. And then lastly, the uh, end goal, which is that the people are going to use one of those use cases in their application, and for which we are going to see there's a lot of effort required. So this is how the whole API consumption journey looks like. Now the big question is that what parts of the API portal can we optimize to make these three phases go well? So to optimize for the API consumer journey, we are going to drill down into each phase in detail. So at the discover phase, the user's goal is only to learn about your API. So to keep them engaged in this phase, you have to show what your API is about. That is, you have to show your value. So we are going to do an experiment here. We are going to keep this interesting. And in this experiment, I'm going to show you a quick glimpse of an API portal, but keeping in with what we have just talked about in the discover phase, the user will be only present on your API for a few seconds. You have not yet converted them. You intend to convert them. So what can you show them to keep them engaged all the way to the next step? So you're also going to get only 7 seconds to look at this example. And then we're going to talk about this example portal. So here it goes. Ooh, so that was a lot to take in one screen, right? So what did you guys see in this API portal? For me, it's kind of a blur because so many things were going on at in the screen. It was kind of a crowded portal, but I did pick up some things. I saw that it's an API reference documentation. It makes some mention of microservices as building block, but I didn't get to read the whole paragraph. I also picked up some terms because they were emphasized. For example, there's a mention of some logical unit. There's a mention of API programming interface. And then because of the design of the portal, it actually got my attention to the table of contents as well, both on the left and the right. And I saw that they have a couple of important, no, no, it doesn't actually look like an important item. They're talking about contribution and curation, and I'm not sure what that has to do with using the API. So why is this API portal not good? Let's break it down and see what went wrong here. In the discover phase, the user is only going to stick with you for a few seconds, and you have to make the most out of it. And in this in this particular case, only have their attention for 10 seconds. So 10 seconds is quite less, like you just saw. So when the users are on your page for only this few seconds, they're going to be scanning your page. They're not going to read your page top to down. So if you have a lot of content there, they're going to quickly lose focus in the cluttered page. And if they don't get to see the value in your page, they're going to quickly bounce off to the next link that they had in their email newsletter, or maybe they came from a Google search engine. So they're going to quickly follow through to the next link because they did not see any reason to stick with going through your portal. Another thing that goes wrong here is that this portal is really making me work hard to see what the API is about. I would ideally like to see a very concise description, a very short introduction about this API, and it should be up front and center. And this API portal does not show what the different parts of the API portal are. I'm not going to stay engaged if I don't know what the value this API portal is going to add to my business use cases. So there's no mention of scenarios anywhere, and there's no example of how this API can be used either. Again, we are going to do another experiment, but this time I'm going to show an API portal that actually will convert user because it is designed well and it has some really good aspects. We're going to break that down, but first let's do this experiment. So you will only have 7 seconds. Here we go. Oof. So this was so much better than the last portal. It seems like a very neatly set up portal. And this is because it has a very simple page structure, and that page structure is optimized for scanning. It really guides the user's eye through the heading, and then to the paragraph, and then through all the boxes and the neat little table of content that is laid out on the left. So it's really great from the perspective of scanning. And then you have a very short intro paragraph which tells me what this API is about without going into too much detail, which is important at this point because the user is not really ready to go into the depth and maybe read a longer paragraph right now. So they have kept it very concise here. And then you have a very simple value proposition demonstrated through these boxes where they're telling that this API can do databases, it can do auth, it can do file storage, but it's not going into detail, it's just mentioning them. But the design of the portal, the base structure, the simplicity of this design is all contributing towards helping the user grab the value that this API is going to bring to them when they start using it. So let's say that you have managed to keep the user engaged through the discover phase. What comes next? The next step is that the user will want to learn what options your API has. That is what use cases, scenarios your API supports, because they're now starting to actually get engaged, and they would want to learn how this API can help them in their work, that is in the business that they have or in the application they're writing right now. Remember that the user just came from a search, or maybe they came from a newsletter. Again, you have them only for a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes at tops. So you have to be really concise, and you have to give the user options that they can exercise very quickly. So I am going to start with a counter example again. This is what you should not do. I like this portal, but they did get a few things wrong. So we're going to talk about how those things affect the explore phase of the portal. Here, this is a API that has a lot of payment related resources. So here I am going to show you what my process was for finding how to accept payments. So here, let's look into that. First, I noticed that there's a couple of options related to payment. I select the first one, which is quite obvious one. But this page is quite long. I see that there's another link that I have to follow. So I'm 2 links in, and I'm still searching for what scenario will fit into my application. This is a lot of work, and there's a lot of options to go through. So I click through the third option. I'm 3 levels in, and here that I see that there's a huge page that I have to read before I can get started with the API. I'm not going to read this huge page. I just wanted a very quick uh, guide to get started. And it seems like on going through this article, I will have to do a lot of work on my own. The users want to see what value they can get. So how can you get this to them as quickly as possible? And the solution to that is you integrate a lot of getting started guides in your API. You put examples, and you put short examples in your API. I don't mean the long articles accompanied by a short example. I do mean short examples that demonstrate the value very quickly. And you try to make sure that your portal is conveying the use cases, especially the most important ones, the most used ones in your API portal. And you want to do that in a very visible way when the user lands on your API portal. In a survey by SmartWare in 2019, they asked a lot of API users what they want to see in the API portals, and a lot of them voted that they want to see examples, right? Because that's how you get started with an API, right? So you want to learn from this and make sure that your API has a lot of examples and that they work for the user. I have an example API portal, and this one has really done a remarkable job at the explore phase. They have listed all the important use cases, and they do that in a very engaging way. There's a whole nice, neat little UI that makes sure that the first thing that you see on this API portal are the most used cases. But you can also switch to the tabs. You can see that there's options for online, in-person, and subscription payment. But the most important cases are right there on top, and they're quite easy to grasp. I know in one glimpse that this API can accept payments. This API can accept payments recurringly, and then you can do payouts after you have received payment. So this is fantastic because by showing this in this way, they have done is they have helped me build a mental model of what this API does. And that's important because later when I'm trying to integrate this API in my application, that mental model will help me figure out what endpoints to call, how to call those endpoints, and if I want to learn more, what are links do I have to click through to keep on exploring, which is what the explore phase is about. And Stripe does this because they understand very strongly that developers are looking for a quick solution. At this point, they're not really ready to go deep into details. So for that, they keep on expanding the examples. You will see even more examples and scenarios and getting started guides on their landing page. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You see that they have even created entire projects that you can clone to get quickly get started using your API, using their API. So, to top it off, they do not just have all this neat little guide set up. Their guides are actually quite engaging, and they do that either by creating videos, but in this case, they have actually created interactive documentation. Yes, that's right. You can interact with the documentation, and in their interactive documentation, what they have done is that they have shown the code sample that the user is going to be using, and they have broken it down and explain clearly what each piece of that code sample is doing. Not only that, you can even see what that code sample implements because you can see that UI rendered here, you can interact with it. So that is pretty fantastic. And this is going to keep the user engaged throughout their explore phase. And this is what is needed to convert the user and get them to the next phase. So to summarize what's critical to get right in the explore phase, you need to have a lot of quick getting started guide covering your most important scenarios. If you're thinking about how many, you should pick 4 or 5 of the most important scenarios in your API, and you should write quick getting started guides for them. And you should make sure that you are surfacing them as early as possible in your doc site so that the users do not keep engage with your site and that they learn about what options there are when they use your API, and that they can quickly make a decision whether this API is for them or not. So this is awesome. We are already 2 phases in, and we have managed to keep the user engaged through the discover and explore phase. Now we are on to the most important phase of the API consumption process, that is integration. Integration is the end goal. Integration is the goal integration is the part where the API user will use your API, that is write real application code to call your API from their application, and they're going to deploy this in production. And once they become dependent on you, I'm pretty sure they'll stay dependent on you and keep using you for a long time to come. This is also the hardest phase for the API user because they have to write developer code in their application. That code has to be tested. That code has to be production ready. That code has to work without making the application explode. So, and since this is a very expensive phase for the API consumer, it will also require the most investment from your side because what you're gonna do is you're gonna work hard to make sure that the integration phase will cost less for the user because if you put effort here, you can kind of amortize the cost that API users have to pay. And to do that, I'm going to show what things are necessary, what parts of API portal you have to improve, and what things need to accompany your API portal to make this phase a success for your API journey. Again, we are going to keep this engaging. So we are going to look at an API documentation site. This API documentation site helps the user create meetings. That's not the important bit. What I want you to focus on is whether this API portal provides the tools necessary for integrating this API in your production application. Remember, this is a critical point that you need to evaluate whether this API provides the bits and pieces necessary to use this API in a production application. And we are beyond just running an example code. We want the user to integrate into their app. So let's take a quick look at the video that I've made. So in this video, what I'm doing is I'm going to quickly find the endpoint that I want to use to create meetings. I already know what endpoint I'm going to use. When I navigate to it, I see a couple of parameters. Uh, I know that this API reference is going to be there later. I just want to run this endpoint very quickly. I want to integrate it into my application. So to do that, what I want to do is copy a code sample. I'm not writing a curl application, so I'll switch to the language that I do write code in, that is Java. Hmm. So that doesn't look right. I don't write production application code like this. This code seems a bit fishy. So I changed to another language to see if I can get some production ready code. And so this doesn't look right either. There's definitely something going wrong here. So let's take a closer look at the code sample. Let's see what went wrong here. So this is the Java code sample. You don't need to know Java. I'm going to make it very easy. I'm going to break down why this code sample is not something that you would put in a production application. So this code sample, to start with, it kind of advocates that you should create an HTTP client whenever you are calling this API. So I know that I'm going to be calling more than one endpoint because this API requires me to create meetings, and then I have to do a lot of other stuff as well. So if I'm creating a HTTP client every time, that's definitely not how I write Java code. I also noticed that there's a lot of repetition in this code. Probably every endpoint is a JSON request, and every endpoint requires API key. So why does this code repeat all of that information? I will want to refactor this out before this makes into production. So, and then while I'm looking at it, I notice another fishy thing, and this one is a security vulnerability. This code seems to suggest that you should put your API key inside your code. I know this is bad because the best practice says that you should be putting your API keys in the environment, and you should be reading it from the environment variable. This is a common case for security mishaps that developers accidentally push API keys into Git repositories and they get published publicly, and then some scraper will basically use that API key to attack your application. And to top it off, I see another problem that this code sample seems to suggest that I should be building the JSON request by using by hand, that is as a string. I don't write application code like this. Usually what I would do is that I would use classes, that is models, to represent the data I want to send. And then I would use a JSON serializer to serialize that data. So this code sample does not pass the smell test for me. I would not want this to make it into my production application code. So I check other code samples and I see similar issues in Node.js. Then I check Go language as well. This Go language code sample will eventually crash your application because they're using the default HTTP client, and the default HTTP client in Go language does not come with a timeout setup. So one bad network error will basically crash your application. This is not good at all. And then I see a similar issue in C Sharp, where they're creating the HTTP client every time an API call is made. And I know that API clients tend to keep the connections open. So if you make too many API calls, you're going to eventually run out of API. Uh, you're going to eventually run out of ports, and ports exhaustion will basically uh, crash your application if it is not handled properly. And if it is handled properly, you will actually see that the best scenario is still that your application will see degraded performance, and that is not good, right? And this is the last one. This is a PHP code sample. This needs really a lot of work. It needs to be heavily refactored. And usually I would not recommend a programmer to use curl calls directly. They should use a wrapper library like Guzzle or Unirest when they're calling the API, because the calls are really short if you use them. So while we are advocating for code samples as the driving force of integration, it seems like this API portal got a lot of them wrong. So why are these code samples not good? Because they're not copy ready. Usually when someone is coming to your API portal, they intend to integrate it, use the API in their application. So you want to give them something that they can copy into their application's code. And these code samples, as you saw, often would crash your API crash the user's application. So that is not good. And again, you see that there are bad practices sprinkled throughout the code samples. They do not follow language semantics, and making them follow language semantics will require extra work from the user who is writing the application code. And to top it off that, if you have to make calls to multiple endpoints in your application code, you will need to refactor all of these code samples, make them more modular. You will have to probably write a wrapping library around these examples. This integration is going to take forever with the kind of issues that I'm looking at. And to make it worse, there are some cases where you can make the production application crash. So what does this API do? It makes the applications crash. That's not good at all. This is insane. So if you do code samples right, they should lower this integration time significantly. And this is critical for the integrate phase, because if you do not get this right, although you have kept the user engaged through the discover and explore phase, you're going to lose them, and you're going to convert and go to another API that is a competitor API to accomplish this task that they wanted to accomplish. And this API portal actually increased the integration time significantly. So what does a sane API integration need? The clue is in the previous slide, where I was talking about how you would want to refactor and clean up and make those API calls into a reusable library. That reusable library is called an SDK, or usually sometimes folks call them client libraries. I've taken a survey of some of the API portals that are loved in the community. They are beloved by us as well, because they do a really good job, both as a product and in terms of their API documentation. It converts really well, and we really love them as users of these APIs as well. So I see that Stripe prominently features SDKs, that is client libraries, in their API reference. This kind of seem to advocate that you should be calling their API using these SDKs. This is something new. And then I see that even Square is advocating that users should be calling their API using one of these SDKs. They even go as far as to make sure that all the code samples are using these client libraries. Their code samples use these libraries to write to show how to call the endpoint. So they're really, really neat, and they do exactly what is needed to call the API and nothing more. And then I see the similar pattern repeat in Twilio, and I see that in DocuSign as well. So this pattern is very well established, that if you want your integrate phase to go well, you have to provide SDKs, because if you have great SDKs, you have great code samples, and you have API integration phase go successful. Woohoo! So this is awesome. We know that the secret to this phase is to write SDKs, but writing SDKs can take a lot of work. What you can do is that you can use APIMatic to automatically generate SDKs. There are other SDK generators as well out there, but APIMatic's SDK is battle tested. It has been maintained for over 6 years, and it is used to make roughly hundreds of millions of API calls every year. Here's an example code that I saw in an API portal, and you can see that if an API code sample uses an SDK, the code sample is automatically very neat. This code sample pretty much reads like poetry. It defines an API request, and then that API request is quickly executed. It does not repeat any of the things that we saw in the previous examples that were being repeated, and there were a lot of mistakes there as well. This code sample is following the best practices, and this is something that I would want my team to use when they're writing an API integration against this API, because I know that it will work, and I know that it will keep my application stable, robust in the in when we deploy it to production. There are not going to be surprises here, right? Because it's a well-tested SDK, and it's going to be. I know that it is used by a lot of people in the community, so the issues are closed. It is well maintained, and it is well taken care of. The integrate phase is quite critical, like I mentioned, because writing production API integration is really hard. So if you invest here, you are basically saving hundreds of developer time, and that is developer time for all of your API consumers. Don't forget that using your API is just one of the steps that a API consumer goes through when they're using your API, because they're going to be also writing an application. They have goals and deadlines to meet. They have other projects to work on. Maybe in the next month or so, they have about 60 tasks in their backlog, and they have a lot of stress at home as well, maybe. And then what do they get stuck with? They get stuck with integrating an API. But if you write neat and clean SDKs and you make integration easy, they're going to be sending their wishes and prayers to you, I'm sure. Just before we finish, I want to share a bonus point with you. That is the last trick, the secret behind API adoption, how to perfect it in your API portal. And the secret revealed is that the best API docs are SDK first. And that's right. In the examples that I've shown you, all of them basically suggest to the user that they should select an SDK first before they can deep dive into the documentation. And all of those documentations are written so that if a user has selected an SDK, they can quickly get their code samples in a language that they have selected. They do not have to learn the whole REST API specification. That is, they do not have to dig into all the REST API details of this API. They will just basically install this SDK in their application, quickly copy the code sample, and they will be able to start running in less than 10 minutes, which is what my goal was with this integration phase. And you can see that all of the good API portals, the portals that I like, that I've shown in this webinar, are using SDKs, and they make it so that all of their documentation is SDK first, and it is very well integrated into the backbone of their API portal. That is, these SDKs are very well integrated. It is woven through all their getting started guides, through their setting up guides, through their first API call guide, and through the entire API reference as well. To summarize, if you want to get the integrate phase right, it is a really hard phase for the developer. So you would want to invest in this phase a lot. And that means writing SDKs to make integrations go as quickly as possible. And you would want to rework your API docs so that they're SDK first, because users have just one goal, making sure that your API works in their they have just one goal, that they want to call your API in their application as quickly as possible. And the quickest way to do that is that they just copy a few bits of Java or maybe JavaScript or PHP code into their application they're running in a few minutes, right? So and this is a success. It seems like we have gone through all three phases: discover, explore, and integrate. And if you have been following what I've shown as examples and counter examples, your API portal should be now number one. I hope that your API program can really use some of this advice. And if you have something to add, and you should definitely ask some questions in this webinar. I'll be happy to take those on. So over to you, Keith.
All right, thank you for that. Thanks for the great presentation. As you walk through some of the bad examples, I had to cringe a little bit. I've done a number of those without thinking, make me feel guilty. I appreciate that. But it looks like we do have some questions, so let's go ahead and dive in. Excuse me. So let's see. First of all, we got an incoming question. For the 10-second discover test and the 1-minute explore test, what is an example of two companies are crushing it today? Who's doing it really well?
So my favorite one is Stripe, because if you're just landing on your API portal right now, you will see that they make a very good case of how your portal should be designed. They just quickly at the explore phase, they're showing all the use cases, and I've shown those in the slides as well. And in the earlier phase, that is the discover phase, they have an even more summarized form of that on their landing page, and it's done in a really engaging way. Since they are quite ubiquitous in the community, they kind of make their own rules as well. Like some people who are learning about Stripe already know that they have already heard about it in payment context, so they can kind of skip the API description bit. They do not have to have an intro paragraph, so they skip ahead and kind of create all these neat little boxes which tells you what beyond API payments they do. You see their radar function and other features as well. But if you dig into one of those features, they again do what I've described in this slide, that they expand all the use cases, and from there it's just the same pattern throughout the API portal.
Yeah, brilliant. So actually, Jenny asked a follow-up to that. How did you come up with the 1-minute threshold through the discover phase?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
How did you come up with the 1-minute threshold for the discovery phase?
So it's not a hard and fast rule, but if you're my goal is that if I'm making an API portal for someone, I'm also optimizing for SEO. So that's where my first 1-minute rule came from. That if you're clicking through links on Google search, you usually jump onto the next link within a minute, or in my case, I usually see that it's only a second. You can check this from Google Analytics as well, that you will see that a lot of people are bouncing off within the first minute. Even if you have a well-designed portal, the bounce rate is pretty high. So what I'd like to do is figure out how to keep this huge chunk of people, because if I can keep them, I'm putting a lot of people at top of my funnel, and then once I've captured them, the next phase are going to convert them into API users. But the first bit is, of course, that you have to keep them somehow on your website, and they're coming from all over the internet, right? They can be coming from blog, or maybe a search engine. So you optimize for the lowest common case, that is search, and if you win at that, then you know that people will also be converting from other channels.
Yeah, I'll actually add a little bit of color there. I mentioned at the beginning, I was at the early days of school. I was employee number 5 there. One of the thresholds has, we wanted to have people productive with the API in 5 to 10 minutes. Because we said, we came to the very clear conclusion that most people, when they bookmarked an API and they wanted to play with it and everything, they'd set aside an hour. But realistically, that hour wasn't really an hour, because there's phone calls. At that point, there were hip chat messages. This is before Slack. There were interruptions. There's people knocking on your door. There's all kinds of things that interrupt that hour. And so what happens is that hour really turns into like 3 good 15-minute segments that you're working without interruption. So if you could get productive in 5 to 10 minutes, that was really powerful, because then at the end of the hour, you're in the position of, I accomplished something. It may not be what I was looking to do, but I accomplished something. Whereas a number of our competitors at that point would take, 30 minutes to get started. But 30 minutes when you only have 15-minute sessions means you got interrupted a couple times. You probably didn't get done with what you're looking for. And by the time you get to the end of the hour, now people are saying, well, I tried it with Twilio, I got it working. I tried it with this other thing, I didn't get it working. Obviously, this other thing is terrible, and Twilio is the winner. So I think those rules of thumb, I think, are fantastic. They make a lot of sense. Let's see, we've got a couple other, wow, the questions are streaming in now. This is great. Let's see, Mehdi, you had a ton of tips and suggestions. And our next question touches on that. If you can make one improvement to almost any API portal, what would be the number one thing you do? What would be the first thing that people would benefit from?
So I would say that most people get the first phase right. That is the discover phase. If you're using an existing API portal solution to build your API portal, you will usually get that right. But the thing that can help the most is focusing on the explore phase. That is getting your use cases laid out properly and figuring out which ones are the most important one, so that you can make them the front piece of your API portal. And then you need to write some really good getting started guide. One of the things that we did inside APIMatic is that we wrote quick start guide, and then we tested it on the new folks who are joining our engineering team. So, and then we would discover issues because we had assumed that this would work. They would have certain environments, and then our getting started guide would kind of fall apart when new people try that outside your team. So invest in those getting started guide, test them out, and make them the front and centerpiece of your API portal.
That's
That should
actually a
get you
brilliant
the.
approach. That's a brilliant approach, because when you're writing one of these guides, you have a lot of inside knowledge on how things work. And so trying it out on the new people, they don't have that same context. So they probably look more like your customers than you and your staff does. So trying it out on them makes perfect sense. That's nice. That's good. So let's see, we've got a couple other questions just came in. Let's see, a couple of people have asked about SDKs. How can people generate different SDKs, especially if they don't have the bandwidth to do that? I heard APIMatic does something with SDKs. Is that true?
Yeah, we have an API portal solution, but the really neat aspect of APIMatic is that we also generate our own SDKs, and that's different from some of the open source solution. We have been basically we created these our first code generator back in 2015, and it is older than some of the open source solutions out there. And what we have done is that with every customer that has joined APIMatic, we have taken their use cases and used that to polish our code generator. We have SDKs that are quite language idiomatic. I mean, if you're using a Java SDK, it would match the expectations of a Java developer. And then these SDKs, our aim is that if you describe your open API spec correctly, you should get a working SDK. And that is important because you will see that there are a lot of solutions out there, but they will often fall apart on corner cases. But we are trying to cover all those cases while keeping those SDKs have a really good user experience. And then to finish it off, what we do is that if you're creating the API portal with us, you will get those SDKs inside the API portal. You will have the option to download those SDKs, or if you have published those SDKs on package repos, you will see the install instructions, and you will see automatically generated code samples in your API portal, which is really neat because if you're writing documentation, a lot of your effort is going to be spent on those examples, but you're getting them for free with APIMatic. And we even have this neat little feature that if you're writing examples in your open API spec, we will pick those simple JSON examples and we will create language specific examples. That is, if you have the Java documentation open, you will see the Java documentation using your example, although you never wrote Java code in the first place, right?
Nice.
APIMatic automatically generated that SDK and put an example together as well using your data.
So you're saying you're not building JSON through string concatenation. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, we do not do that, and you
Good.
should not do that
Good.
either.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go off script a little bit and ask a question for myself. One of the things that drives me nuts about API portals and documentation and samples and all these things is they end up being in like 6 different places. Some of it will be on GitHub, some of it will be on the documentation portal site. Some of it is sometimes that's due to like how a company launches their website. It might be in a WordPress, static web pages, whatever. How do you guys approach embedding the portal like in the site? How do I make sure that everything is in one place to make sure that my users have one place to go?
So that's a tough one, Keith. But I would say that it depends on your API and the size of your API. Sometimes it is better to have a combination of different documentation because it's just that your domain is so large. So you might have different teams working on that, and if forcing them all to just come create one combined portal might actually result in a portal that no one will understand. So you have to do a bit of a balancing act. But if you're just starting out right now, I'm pretty sure your API is not so large. So what you can do is that you create an API portal using if you're using APIMatic, you can basically create a repository where you can document your API using Markdown files, Open API file, and everyone can contribute to that. And you just add a GitHub action that will automatically deploy that content as an APIMatic portal. So APIMatic will take that and generate a portal. So it really helps all the team contribute together. Although I would recommend that you have one person responsible for figuring out what the content hierarchy is going to be. If you have
Mhm.
your domain properly mapped out, then what you do is you as a team, you need to figure out what the table of content would look like, because there are going to be competing sub APIs in your API, and you need to figure out as a business which one you need to surface first. And like we talked about, some of the getting started guides must come before other. So someone needs to be making those decisions. We do provide the tools, but as your content team will have to definitely have to invest into what the uh, hierarchy would look like for documentation, and they will have to listen to feedback and watch it the page analytics as well, and so that they can keep optimizing it as the business grows.
So you're saying despite great tooling, you still have to prioritize, you still have to
Yeah,
design and have like information
yeah,
architecture.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. It's reasonable, and I think you're spot on with understanding who your audience is and giving them the right solution that they need. So that's a good point. Let's see. I think we've got one more. I think we'll close out on this one. I know there's a couple other questions. We'll close out and then we'll talk about how to get a hold of you guys. So let's see, Caleb asks, I'm curious about launch best practices. Where to advertise pre-launch, timing, major milestones, best practices before somebody gets to the website? What have you seen that's worked?
So this is a lot of sorry, this is a lot of things in one question, but let's start with the developer relations bit. People have different channels where they can push, and that's these channels they start building much before their API launch happens. Sometimes we see that people have Slack and they have a forum, and they have GitHub repos where they're pushing open source code, so they already have links to the developers via issues and discussion there. So when you're doing the API launch, you must already have some of these channels set up, and so that you can get the news out there. And then there are often newsletters that can help you push that. But the thing is that what would work in your domain, the product that you're building, it's going to be different for everyone. For payment guys, maybe it's a whole different scenario than the folks that who are working in the travel industry. for some people, they might have to do real physical road shows, right, to get to the audience that they want to talk to. It also depends on the kind of API that you have. Some APIs are developer oriented, then some APIs will only be used by large industry users, that is enterprises. You won't see them being bought up by companies that have a small revenue. So this whole question, it depends on your domain, what kind
Absolutely.
of setup you are, what your target market is. But
Yeah,
Keith, if
absolutely.
you
And
have
that's
some suggestions here.
Yeah, and that's the same thing we saw at Twilio, especially in the earlier days. We were focused entirely on developers. So it was a developer evangelism led effort. I was one of those evangelists, hitting hackathons, hitting conferences, talking about like best practices for APIs and how and why to integrate APIs. With Okta is definitely more enterprise type organizations. So we spent a lot of time working with large companies, helping them get started on things, helping them try things out. And in fact, just last week at Ingrok, we launched a new version of our product. It's from the ground up improvements across the board. And that one was really interesting because it was a blend of both. So we definitely have a developer oriented like go to market. So we had all of our friends and allies tweeting about it, sharing it on Product Hunt, posting it to Hacker News, talking about all those things. But then also we're reaching out to all of our existing users, our existing customers, letting them know, hey, look, this has been production quality for a while, but there's even more to it. And I'm happy to say we're working to roll out our open API spec for it very shortly. So I'm hoping to be able to use some of this tooling because, man, you guys just make life easier on this front. So I really am, I'm kind of biased, but I think it's right.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, another thing that I noticed that is there are these no-code platforms where people are integrating their APIs, so they kind of get a free push on their marketplace just because they're making their API available via Zapier or similar solution. And that's another good bit about this is that your API will get usage from people who are non-developers, so it will get a different kind of audience as well, folks who are not directly making REST API calls.
All right, fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and close out now. Let's see, to find more about APIMatic, definitely check out APIMatic on Twitter and APIMatic.io. That's APIMatic.io. Definitely check out the SDK generation. And in fact, I'm getting a back channel message. It sounds like there's enough people interested in SDKs that probably a dedicated webinar in SDK design and doing why Idiomatic is better than JSON string concatenation is probably high on the agenda. So definitely stay tuned, stay in touch, see what these guys are working on. Mehdi, again, thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And with that, have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.